Hey guys, earlier I kind of had a little thought about a friend of mine that passed away a few years ago, and I played the song that I put on Crumbs, and I just been thinking about my friend, and I wanted to do maybe a little tribute to his life. Most of y'all will not know who he is, but at least 3 people on this page, me, Paul Watkins, and Mike McCarty, knew him very well, and he had a huge impact on my life. He died very young, and I'm just going. There's no notes. I'm just kind of going off the cuff. But Mark and I met in the early '90s, like 90, 91. He was the principal of the Christian school, Hebron Christian School. He'd grown up, in the Baptist church, and of course I had just came into the baptism of the Holy Spirit, so I was a fanatic. I was fanatical. I was listening to Kenneth Hagin and Kenneth Copeland, and I didn't know what was right. Those were people who believed in that kind of stuff, and I was trying to, see miracles and all that. Where he's coming out of a very conservative Baptist background, but he's starting to come to New Covenant Church. He is connected really with Mike McCarty, who is on this page, director of IOM, good friend of mine for the 30 years. And so he and I somehow started hanging out. Now, we had, other than the Lord, we had nothing in common. Mark was not an athlete. I guess he probably never played a sport in his life. If we had a church event, he didn't play sports. He was a musician. He was. I never said this while he was alive, but I know he's probably heard me say this. But to me, his physique was like Kermit the Frog. He was very narrow, like little arms, little legs, kind of a little pot belly. He weighed about 125, 30 pounds. He didn't hunt. He didn't fish. He didn't fight. He didn't do any karate. He didn't do anything other than he loved the Lord. And we started out on opposite ends of the spectrum. I was coming at things from a brand new spirit baptized believer. I won't use the word spirit filled because that kind of comes and goes, but having come into this experience with the Holy Spirit, and then he's coming at a place of seeking, but from a long history of a good Baptist kid, and having led either a music minister or youth minister at Meadowview Baptist Church or something. Mike, you might can correct me, and was the principal of a conservative Baptist Christian school. And he and I started just talking about the Lord together, and our entire conversations in the beginning was debate. I was on one side, he was on the other, and we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And over the years, what happened was we ran out of things to talk about because I changed a lot of my positions through our debates. He would bring up a point, and I'd be like, I don't like that, but let me rethink that. And then I would bring up a point, and he'd be like, oh. And so after several years, we actually came to a very common ground where we agreed, I would say, probably on most things. Most essential things, all essential things I think we agreed on, but most things in general. Surprisingly enough, he is the one that got me to go on the second mission trip with a guy named Bill Lawler. And I'm going to tell some wild stories later about some moves of the Spirit that it was kind of introduced to me on that mission trip. It was, and then I went through some hard times, and Mark was he just was a friend. It was, to my knowledge, I just can't remember Mark ever judging me or making me feel condemned. He was very pastoral. He loved, and he was committed. And I would have said, Mark is in that season of my life, I said, Mark is my best friend. Mark's my best friend. What I found out later is there were probably 100 people that thought Mark was their best friend. And everybody can't be the best friend, but pretty sure I was. But anyway, the rest of y'all, maybe you were, I don't know. But But there's three people, me, Mike, and Paul. I guarantee you, all of us would have said during the season we knew Mark is one of my best friends. We would have said at least one of, if not the best friend we had. Now, Mike had really mentored Mark in the Lord, and Paul and I were more like peers. But we had some incredible stories, and some of the stories I've told and some of them I will tell have to do with Mark. And I've told one story about when the Lord said, go see Mark, and I went and he was dying and all that kind of stuff. And so maybe I'll get around to some more, but Mark was a huge influence on my life. And when he got cancer, so what he decided, he was a principal, and he decided, I'm going to go to law school. I mean, no, not law school, medical school. And so, I mean, he's already like 26 years old. I'm like 21, something like that. So he takes the MCAT, blows it out of the water, and next thing you know, he's in medical school. About 2 years into medical school, and he develops a knot in his shoulder. And I remember he told me, he said, look, I want you to pray for him. I'm going to get this checked out, but I got a little knot. I felt on it. I mean, I was like, it's nothing. Well, it turned out to be a very rare sarcoma with like a 99% death rate if you get this type of cancer. Well, this didn't fit. I mean, the calling of God on my life, the calling of God on his life, it just didn't fit. And I sought the Lord on it, and I felt like I heard the Lord say, he'll live and not die. And not just once, but just like a reoccurring theme as I prayed for him, he will live and not die. And so I kind of refused to accept any news that was negative. He had to drop out of school, went through chemo, lost all his hair, went through radiation. And he told me, I remember it was in Mobile, Alabama. He told me, he said, look, if this thing comes back, I don't think I'm going to do the chemo again. And like I've told you before, I didn't have a good place with sickness and death in my spirit. And so I would just say, look, you're going to live and not die, brother. You're going to be fine. And I just stood on that. And so time went on, and he got a little better, you know, and then it came back. And they had to go in, and they took a bunch of his lung out. And this was somewhere around the time, I don't remember if it was before or after I came over to his house when he was dying, but it was around that time. And he wanted me to come over and visit with him. And at that time, he was probably, I don't know what he weighed, but he looked like he weighed 300 pounds. But again, this is Kermit the Frog. But he's been on steroids, and he's just ballooned. So everything is puffy, kind of like the Marshmallow Man or whatever, Pillsbury Doughboy or whatever. I mean, you almost felt like you could just push your hand like, 3 inches into his cheeks. And it was just really hard for me because other than grandparents, I had no place for death. And I learned, I still don't know if I have a place for it, okay? But I kept believing God was saying to me, he will live and not die. But he wanted me to sit down with him. And I sat down with him, and he said to me, he said, look, I want you to know something. He said, I believe you when you say I will live and not die. I said, I don't have faith for it, but I know you do. And you're standing in the gap for me. And I've told my wife, I don't have faith, but Clint does. And I'm standing with that, And of course, I didn't want to hear it because I felt like we're just kind of like going to the negative. I didn't want to hear it. I'm getting a little emotional. But he said, but I want you to know something. He said, if I do die, it's okay. He said, I wouldn't have said this years ago, but what I've experienced in the Lord between, whatever time he got up, the first 3 or 4 hours of his day, he was encountering the Lord. He said, what have I experienced in the Lord? He said, I'm going to be fine. He said, in fact, for most people, heaven's going to be a shock. But for me, for what I'm experiencing in my mornings, I don't think it's going to be a big transition. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to hear it. Well, little time went on. Mike called me and said, hey, you better come to the hospital. I think it's about time. So I don't remember. I was coming back from Louisiana. I went by the hospital. He was already kind of in a coma. And I stayed around, I stayed there with Mike for a little while, and then I just went home. And within an hour or so, I want to say Shannon might have talked to Mike. He called and said he's gone, And I don't know, I was just devastated. I mean, I lost a piece of my life. I mean, I never knew at that time a person could be so connected in your heart, that your own identity, you know, your relationship with your friend, how important that was. And I just cried. I I mean, I didn't wail. I just cried, and I cried for weeks, and I cried for, you know, probably a whole year. I mean, when I was alone, I would think about Mark and I'd cry. But I was also a little bit angry because I've done a whole series on hearing God, and y'all probably all watched some of it, if not all of it. And I was mad at God because I felt like I had a word, and I stood with him in this word, and he believed the word. I believed the word. I fought with him in this word, and he will live and not die. And so I was at the funeral, and I was one of the pallbearers, and me and all the guys on the front row, we were just baskets of tears. I mean, we were just crying. We couldn't. And it was I don't know, I think it was about 2 hours of a celebration of his life. And it was by far the best funeral I've ever been to, because it wasn't like we're sad. It's like this was a man of God, and people were up there testifying about how they affected his life and all that kind of stuff. And I would guess in Florence, Mississippi, on that funeral, there was about 600 people. And I was thinking, when I was sitting there listening, I mean, my job was the pallbearer, to help carry the casket. I was thinking, you know, wouldn't it be great if at the end of my life I had this many people show up? Well, a day or two later, they had another funeral in Starkville, which is 2.5 hours away, because he had been the principal of the school and he had touched many lives. And I don't know, Mike, you might have been there. I think it was at Faith Baptist Church, maybe. I don't know where it was, but I think there was like close to 1,000 people there. I might be wrong, but I wasn't at that one. And then the medical school also had a funeral for him, a memorial for him, and he had apparently touched everybody in the medical school. Now, but of course, I'm still angry. Now I get to go to church. Now we're doing the rah rah rah, you know, vineyard worship. We're rocking, and I'm mad at the Lord. I mean, I'm angry. And I told the Lord, I said, "You lied to me." I'm just telling you what I said. I mean, I told the Lord in my worship, I said, "You lied to me. You told me he would live and not die." And I felt like the Lord said to me in that still small voice, he said, "I didn't lie to you, Clint. He did live." And when he said that, all of a sudden I saw that 1,800 or 2,000 people that were grieving his life and had been affected by his life, and listening to those testimonies of how he was their best friend, and how he'd encouraged them to walk with the Lord. And he was only like 34 years old, you know, or something like that. Maybe 36, maybe 32. I'm not 100% on all that, but he had a choice. And this is what the Lord showed me. When you met him in Mobile, he did not know if he was going to decide to live or die. And he told me that. But I didn't put it together until the Lord spoke to me in this worship. He decided that day he was going to live. Now, he and I went on at least one more mission trip together, and the Lord really moved. And he went on a couple of mission trips, not just with me, but without me. And then he did all kind of stuff. And it reminds me of the song. And so when I did this little thing at the speech class and did a tribute to his life, I finished it with the song, "Live Like You're Dying." So my friend Mark did more in 30-something years than I've done in an entire 53. And probably if I have another 53, I can't do what he did. And Jesus was not that old when he died. So I don't know, maybe Mike, you can tell a little story about Mark, but I do believe in my heart, Mark was a great man. And I do believe, and this does hold me accountable, and Paul, I think you probably feel this way too. I feel like he's one of the witnesses that's watching us. And so when I struggled, when I failed, I always kind of feel like Mark's watching, you know, and I don't want to let him down, but he never judged me. So I don't think he's watching me like, oh, you're, you know, I just think he's pulling for me. And if the witnesses can see, and I don't know the theology on that, and nobody does, y'all can say you do, but you don't know. We don't know. I don't pray to Mark or anything like that, but I'm just saying he's one of the guys I really like to finish well, all right, for, because he He wasn't here to do it with me, which was our plan all along, that we would be doing this stuff right now together for God, and he would be like my pastor or whatever. So anyway, it's a nice intro to Mark. I hope it blesses you. Watch this, listen to the song, watch this, listen to the song again, and then Mike, if you can, Paul, if you can, y'all do a little tribute to Mark as well. I think he's, well, we all know he deserves it, and he all meant something to all of us. All right, see you.